Welcome everyone to uh, to this scripture study, which is going to kick off a series of studies on the lectures on faith. Before we dive into the lectures on faith, I wanted to first turn to Joseph Smith's uh, "Try the Spirits" talk. We're going to spend today and maybe a couple other sessions diving into that talk. And I titled this study "Try the Spirits." Why try the spirits and why philosophy? And my inspiration for doing this is I would like to. I've been studying philosophy for the last 2 years and read a wide array of philosophers. And I'm going to explain why philosophy, I believe, is an important thing, even for the layman or the everyday man to kind of be familiar with, because they are akin to spirits that govern perception, govern your behavior, and dictate the way you act in the world. And if you're not aware of the spirit animating your behavior or aware of the philosophy that governs your perception, if you're not aware of it, you can't root it out and get rid of it. And so I'm going to start this discussion out with a little preface before we dive into Joseph Smith's work on Try the Spirits. I want to kind of make a sales pitch to all of you guys about why philosophy is important and to kind of clear up some assumptions about what philosophy is. Because often we hear philosophy and we think of a bunch of academics or people in Greek togas discussing what is the nature of man, and they're throwing around featherless biped chickens at each other, and or some other weird philosophical story. And I want to kind of clear that up because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding of its relevance because it seems like it's an ivory tower pursuit. And I want to sell it to you guys as something that can be very practical. So, what is philosophy? First off, I don't think it's mere people just speculating about the nature of reality. I think it's much more practical and integrated. And it's not necessarily separate from religion. Before the dawn of the modern age, philosophy and religion or theology were like synonymous. They were the same thing. Now we've kind of separated it, where we have our religion over here and our philosophy over here. But before, those were the same things. Because what is religion? It's to connect with the heavens. And what is philosophy? It's love of wisdom. And what does that mean, to have the love of wisdom? Philosophia. It's to have the perspective, the heavenly perspective, the true knowledge. And so philosophy is the process by which you come to know that. So you can see how this dovetails really closely with religion. So philosophy, what is philosophy? I'm going to kind of share some ideas here from the book called Philosophy Who Needs It by Ayn Rand. And this will only take about 10 minutes to kind of make my case here. Philosophy, a philosophical system, is an integrated view of existence. As a human being, you have no choice about the fact that you need a philosophy. Your choice is whether you define your philosophy by a conscious, rational, disciplined process of thought and scrupulous, logical deliberation, or you let your subconscious accumulate a junk heap of unwarranted conclusions, false generalizations, undefined contradictions, undigested slogans, unidentified wishes, doubts, and fears thrown together by chance, but integrated by your subconscious into a kind of mongrel philosophy and fused into a single solid weight, self-doubt, a ball and chain in the place where your mind's wings should have grown. So a lot of clunky words there. What the philosophy is your worldview. And it's, if you aren't aware of why you have the worldview that you have, you're going to get subsumed by some other person's philosophical worldview. So philosophy is just that. It's the worldview that you have. And when you have the correct worldview, or you understand your worldview, your way of knowing, and your politics and your aesthetics and your ethics kind of flow downstream from that. In philosophy, there's another quote, the fundamentals are metaphysics and epistemology. Metaphysics is how reality is. Is reality knowable or is it unknowable? Is life an illusion? Is all there is material stuff? Are we living in a simulation? Those are the questions of metaphysics. Is there a heaven above us? Metaphysical questions. When you understand that, that will inform whether your epistemology, whether that universe, your existence, can be observed and known. On the basis of a knowable universe and of a rational faculties, competence to grasp it, you can define the proper ethics, politics, and aesthetics. So your politics, your aesthetics, your ethics are going to flow downstream of what your worldview is. And so a lot of this, what we're going to be doing in this study of Joseph Smith's Lectures on Faith, but first trying the spirits, is to try and understand the fundamentals. What is the worldview that we are building our entire framework of how we come to know something? We're building up our ethics, we're building up our appreciation for art as aesthetics, and informing our politics. That's all going to, we aren't going to talk about that explicitly, but we're going to talk about the fundamentals, the assumptions. And so I want to, that's kind of what philosophy is in a nutshell. At its core, you could say. The core is understanding what is reality. Now, okay, and then so I want to, why is philosophy, why is understanding the nature of reality important? Why is it practical? Why do we need this? See, philosophy answers three questions. Who am I? How do I know? And what do I do? It gives you an orientation. It tells you about yourself. You're not disorientated when you have a philosophical foundation to think from. It's not like science. Science will tell you how to get from point A to point B. It will inform you and tell you how to get into a car and how to use that car to drive from Boise to Salt Lake City. That is in the realm of science. Philosophy, on the other hand, will tell you how you can, well, philosophy will not tell you, for instance, whether you are in New York City or Boise or in Salt Lake City, though it will give you the means to find out. But here is what it would tell you. You are in a universe that is ruled by natural laws and therefore is stable, firm, absolute, and knowable. Or are you in an incomprehensible chaos, a realm of inexplicable miracles and an unpredictable knowable flux, which your mind is impotent to grasp? Are the things you see around you real, or are they an illusion? Do they exist independent of any observer, or are they created by an observer? Are they the object of the subject of man's consciousness? Are they what they are, or can they be changed by a mere act of your consciousness, such as wishful thinking? So philosophy gives you that, and that's important. And I hope that becomes clear as we kind of dive into this text. So, how does philosophy function? Philosophy is an abstract. It does deal in abstractions, which can be difficult. Now ask yourself, if you are not interested in abstract ideas, why do you and all men feel compelled to use them? The fact is that abstract ideas are conceptual integrations which subsume an incalculable number of concretes. And without that abstract ideas, you would not be able to deal with concrete, particular real-life problems. So a huge counter. You don't need philosophy because all that abstract stuff is woo-woo, mumbo-jumbo. I want to deal with the practical stuff, the things right here, right now. What philosophy is dealing with is the principles, and your principles will inform how you act in the concretes, how you act in the particulars, why you do something that you do. They are, when we deal with philosophy, we're dealing with abstract ideas, heavenly ideas, things that govern things in heaven that govern things below here on earth, you could say. So that's what we're going to be working through. And that is important because whether you're aware of it or not, those things, those animating principles do govern your behavior. Hence why it's been important for covenant Christians to develop a statement of principles. Because if we don't have principles, what is governing our behaviors? Now, some of you might say, as many people do, I never think in such abstract terms. I want to deal with concretes, particular real-life problems. What do I need philosophy for? My answer is, in order to be able to deal with concrete, particular real-life problems, i.e., in order to be able to live on Earth. You might claim, as most people do, that you have never been influenced by philosophy. I will ask you to check that claim. Have you ever thought of the following? Don't be so sure. Nobody can be certain of anything. You got that notion from David Hume and many, many others, even though you might have never heard of him. Or, this may be good in theory, but doesn't work in practice. He got that from Plato. Or, it was a rotten thing to do, but it's only human. Nobody is perfect in this world. You got that from Augustine. Or, it may be true for you, but it's not true for me. You got that from William James. Or, I couldn't help it. Nobody can help anything he does. You got that from Hegel. Or, I can't prove it, but it feels that but I can't prove it, but I feel that it's true. You got that from Kant. Or, it's logical, but logic has nothing to do with reality. You got that from Kant. Or, it's evil because it's selfish. You got that from Kant. Have you ever heard the modern activists say, act first, think afterwards? Fuck around and find out. That's the modern slogan of today. You got that from John Dewey. Progressivism. Pragmatism. Some people might answer, sure, I've never said those things at different times, but I don't have to believe that stuff all the time. It may have been true yesterday, but it's not true today. You got that from Hegel. They might say consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. They got that from a very little mind, Emerson. They might say, but can't one compromise on and borrow different ideas from different philosophies or religions according to the expediency of the moment? They got that from Richard Nixon, who got that from William James. So whether you're aware of it or not, these philosophies do govern your behavior. They change, they alter the way you they create thought patterns, and those thought patterns dictate the way you see reality, and that will then dictate how you act in the world. And much like a computer with software, you have the ability to program the software of your mind. And if you feed it junk information, you feed it junk philosophies or false spirits, you're going to get a crappy garbage in, garbage out, as the programmers say. And so part of the role of philosophy, it's much more of a practice than it is an actual academic pursuit of knowing all the arguments. It's a practice to program your mind to think in the correct way, to make sure that your thought patterns are actually in coherence with actual reality, whatever reality is. Whatever you believe reality to be is going to determine how you act. So make sure you get that right. Okay, a little side tangent here about religion in general. People have been reading religious texts in Christianity for about 1,000 years, and they've been able to use Christian texts from the Bible to justify benevolent torture. That is Augustine, who has been animated by the ideas of Plato, that if you inflict pain on someone in this life, it's okay. If you torture them to confess Christ and they accept the gospel, it's okay, because that pales in comparison to the weight and glory of the eternal realities. And so that justified a lot of inquisitions, benevolent torture. A lot of the arguments atheists will use against Christianity being evil, that was viewed through the lens of a Platonic Augustinian philosophy. That changed in the Renaissance because of the works of Aristotle. And people started reading Aristotle, who did not take the Platonic view that man was low and vile and in this dualistic divide. Rather, in the Aristotelian metaphysics, it views man as being desiring to know, that their senses are good, that life is good, and is a very life-affirming philosophy. And Christians, like Thomas Aquinas, took that paradigm from Aristotle and started reading the Bible from an Aristotelian perspective. And they were able to see things in the Bible that they were blinded to before, because they were reading it from a strictly Platonic Augustinian metaphysics. And that spurred about the Renaissance, which spurred about the humanist movement, which spurred about this new form of Christianity that John Locke picked up, about respecting people's rights, respecting people's autonomy. That brought about liberalism, classical liberalism in the West, and brought about the civilization that we enjoy today, that respects people's individual rights. We have that because of Aristotle, and we have the Christian interpretation we have today is thanks to Aristotle. We've read scriptures through the Aristotelian lens. So the philosophy that governs your perception, very important. Garbage in, garbage out. Make sure. And so what we're going to be doing here over the next several weeks is trying to fine-tune the programming, the philosophies the philosophies of spirits that govern our perception. We're going to wrestle through that. We're going to question and make assumptions of it. One last counter. Why should you spend time studying wicked philosophies or evil philosophies like Hegelian metaphysics or Immanuel Kant? Why is that stuff important? Should we not resist evil? One last point. If philosophy can be evil, why should one study it? Particularly, why should one study philosophical theories which are blatantly false, make no sense, and bear no relation to real life? My answer is self-protection, and in defense of truth, justice, and freedom, and any value you ever held or may ever hold. Not all philosophies are evil, though many of them are, particularly in modern history. On the other hand, at the root of every civilized achievement, such as science, technology, progress, and freedom, at the root of every value we enjoy today, including the birth of this country, you'll find the achievement of one man who ever lived 1,000 years ago. That's Aristotle. I'll skip over here. If you feel nothing but boredom when reading the virtually unintelligible theories of some philosophers, you have my deepest sympathies. But if you brush them aside saying, why should I study that stuff when I know it's nonsense? You are mistaken. It is nonsense, but you don't know it. Not so long as you go on accepting their conclusions, all the examples I gave earlier, the thought patterns that are governing your life, all the vicious catchphrases generated by these philosophers, and not so long as you are unable to refute them. That nonsense deals with the most crucial, the life and death issues of man's existence. At the root of every significant philosophical theory, there is a legitimate issue, in the sense that there is an authentic need of man's consciousness, which some theories corrupt to prevent man from ever discovering. The battle of philosophers is a battle of man's mind. If you don't understand their theories, you are vulnerable to the worst among them. We're going to read Joseph Smith's Try the Spirits. You need to drag out those spirits into the light. If you're not aware of them, they will possess you and they will dictate your behavior, and you will be acting by the influence of those spirits. So to do philosophy, even to study the bad philosophies, which I've spent the last 2 years studying, is to be aware of those governing principles that cause men to act in a certain way. And when you are aware of it, you can exercise it. You can disregard it. A battle of this kind requires special weapons. It has to be fought with a full understanding of your cause, a full confidence in yourself, and the fullest certainty of moral righteousness of both. Only philosophy can provide you with these weapons. And so, what we're going to do here is, as we go through the lectures on faith, and as we go through trying the spirits, we're going to observe behaviors both in politics, psychology, interpersonal dynamics, and we're going to observe the fruits of these behaviors and see if we can trace the philosophical roots like a detective. We're going to find the causal thought patterns that lead to this behavior. Joseph Smith does a really good job at laying that out and Try the Spirits. We're going to take that and try to liken that to our situation, and we're going to use the tools of philosophy, logical analysis, critical thinking, to really dive into this. And the way we're going to kind of cultivate that in the study is using Socratic dialogue. We're going to enter into it together. We're going to ask challenging questions that challenge our assumptions so that we can self-reflect on our behavior, self-reflect on where we are at, and then use logic, use rationality, critical thinking skills to build through that. So that will be kind of the format of these studies that we're going to engage in. So that is my sales pitch of why philosophy is important. I'll take some feedback now, and then we'll dive into the text for about another 30 minutes because we kind of ran late today. Any questions on why philosophy is important, or criticisms? Yes, Parker.
I wanted to go. I don't want to derail it. And then I actually have a question. When you were talking about philosophy and principle, you brought up a statement of principle. Do you believe that what we have canonized in our scriptures now can be correctly described as principles?
Okay, so I think with the statement of principles, I believe, and I kind of Rob has persuaded me to his opinion on this because we've had
Yeah,
dialogues.
that's what that's
Both Rob
inspiration for
and
my
Ayn
question.
Rand, that the purpose of principles and using the tools of philosophy is so that you can understand the principles. When you understand the principles, and Ayn Rand talks about this in her book on capitalism, when a group has principles and they articulate it and they understand it, when they make contact with another group who is unprincipled or has false principles, the group that knows their principles and their principles are in connection with actual reality will overpower, will not be torn down by the group of no principles or bad principles. However, when a group doesn't know their principles, when they don't have engaged in the process of knowledge to know why they act in a certain way, when they encounter another group, other people who know nothing yet of this work, as the Answering Covenant says, the unprincipled group will be overtaken, that they will just wash away. And so, what really the statement of principles is about is the process of knowing why we do the things we do, knowing what we are governed by. So, my critique on the statement of principles, to keep this short, is I don't think the statement of principles adequately conveys that. I view it and I see it as a regurgitation of snippets from Denver. And I'm not so confident that we actually understand what Denver is saying in those principles. I could be wrong
I
though,
agree.
but from my analysis, it seems like it's parroting, and I'm not sure if that is fulfilling the spirit of the assignment. So,
I agree.
so
Yeah, I don't want
controversial
to
point.
derail anything, but I
Yeah,
just want to get your
um,
thoughts on that.
but that ties to what we're doing here. What we're going to be doing in these studies is we're going to seek to understand the principles, um, and that's why I'm using the lectures on faith and trying to spirits as two kind of base texts, because those convey a lot of principles. They lay the groundwork for a lot of metaphysics in epistemology. When you understand that, you know how to build up your ethics, politics, aesthetics. All of that follows through. So um, that's the plan. Any other questions? All right, then if none, we will proceed. Make sure you guys have your glossary of terms as well as your teaching and commandments. We're going to be pulling from that. Parker, can you, you're going to be my Jamie today and pull up the scriptures. Why don't you pull up TNC 147 and let's get into the text. Keep in mind, when we're going to get into this text, we're going to question. I want this to be very dialogical. If there are words we don't understand, let's clarify the definitions of these words so we are all working from the same place. Let's let everyone get their scriptures, and then we'll get into this. Any volunteers? Dallin, would you like to read? I say any volunteers, and then I call upon someone. I think good questions to have when we go through this. We're trying to like I said, we're trying to uncover the epistemology of Joseph Smith here in this talk. We're trying to. Oh, and gosh, later on this talk, he talks about metaphysics and he kind of destroys dualism. I'm excited to get to that. We may not get to that today, though. So, all right, Dallin, why don't you take it away? Let's read the first paragraph.
For TNC 147.
147. Try the spirit.
All right.
Oh wait, Parker, are you familiar with this text? Enough to give a summary on it, like what with the context, the historical context?
Okay, I can give
Yeah.
a brief historical context.
Oh, why don't you give a brief historical context for all of us and those who will listen to this recording?
All right, so I think a lot of us in the Covenant community have heard about the text, check and passing. But the context is, as you know, the current temple was dedicated. There was a Pentecostal outpouring of the Spirit, and we often hear the good God about, like, oh yeah, we Spirit of God, like a fire is burning and angels can come in and people are speaking in tongues. But what happened kind of around and after that is people started acting really weird. Like a lot of just a lot of crazy action from going on. Like people would in soccer meeting, people would be possessed by spirit and would act out rowing a boat across the river and could preach the gospel to the Lamanites and the very well I you I don't want to make a I don't want to cast I don't want to disparage people belief systems, but if it started acting like Pentecostals.
And very charismatic.
Yeah, very charismatic Pentecostal.
Mm.
And Joseph laid out the thing, hey, when a bunch of when the veil is opened and the Spirit of God is poured forth, when a lot of a false spirit comes through the veil as well, and we gotta get a grip on ourselves because not every spirit that seeks influence man is good. And so this is Joseph going, hey, like, y'all be careful, okay?
Awesome. Thank you, Parker. All right, now with that, let's hear from the Dallin. Why don't you go ahead and start? Let's dive into the text.
All right. Recent occurrences that have transpired among us render it an imperative duty devolving upon me to say something in relation to the spirits by which men are actuated. It is evident from the apostles' writings that many false spirits existed in their day and had gone forth into the world, and that it needed intelligence which God alone could impart to detect false spirits and to prove what spirits were of God. The world in general have been grossly ignorant in regard to this one thing. And why should they be otherwise? For no man knows the things of God but by the Spirit of God. The Egyptians were not able to discover the difference between the miracles of Moses and those of the magicians until they came to be tested together. And if Moses had not appeared in their midst, they would unquestionably have thought that the miracles of the magicians were performed through the mighty power of God, for they were great miracles that were performed by them. A supernatural agency was developed and great power manifested.
Awesome. Yeah, let's pause there. I want to point out here. There's a few things I want to first point out about this idea of Moses and the magicians, and this idea that there's a little compare and contrasting here down here, and you need that comparing and contrasting to bring clarity on what is a false spirit and a good spirit. Dallin, you're a scientist. I know you have your master's degree in, I think it's biology or
Well,
something in this,
I was
something similar, right?
yeah, I was on a PhD path for biophysics, but then
Biophysics, yeah.
I switched my degree to mechatronic engineering.
So you're familiar with that. Dallin, could you explain what is the difference between observational studies and randomized controlled trials?
The difference between observational studies, well,
Yeah.
my first thought would be the second one. You are able to gather like hard data from, like
Yeah.
a comparison like there's hard data. If it's just a observational thing, it's more of like a soft science where you have correlation. You're kind of
Okay.
dependent on correlation factors.
Describe what is correlation in the field of science, and how is it different than causation, and how do you determine something is causal in science and
Yeah,
not correlational?
correlation does not equal causation.
So what are those two terms? What is correlation and what is causation?
Correlation, man, I used to know this so well. Correlation is like, I don't know, I think of like a graph, and if there's something you're studying that goes up, like, increases, and then something else also increases along with that, you kind of assume that they're correlated or have a relationship. in some way, like they affect each other, but that's not necessarily true.
So like smartphone usage has increased and so has obesities. Could I say that smartphones are causing obesity? Is the causal link?
No, that would be a
No.
correlation.
Yeah,
sure.
correlation.
Right.
So in science, how do you isolate? How do you determine if something is causal then? So it's not just correlation, because there's a million things that could be correlation. Like what else? The invention of microwaves has caused, I could say, it has caused increase of stress increase in stress in capitalistic societies in the modern world. Is that correlation or causation? There's a million other things.
Yeah, you can make up correlations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you get the cause? How do you differentiate causal from correlation? What do you do in science?
You have variables and control.
Okay.
You have variables that you alter, and then controls that remain the same. So you have that delta or the difference, the what's the, I forget what the actual word is, but yeah, there's a difference that happens by changing one variable. You know.
And so you isolate one variable and you run a test to see if that's the causal, if
Right.
that's what's actually causal. And if it's not, you can rule that out.
Right. Yes.
Okay, so let's jump back to Moses here. Moses is doing, so the Egyptians. It says here, the Egyptians were not able to discover the difference between miracles of Moses and those of the magicians until they came to be tested together. If Moses had not appeared in their midst, they would have undoubtedly had thought that the miracles of the magician were performed by the mighty powers of God. For they were great miracles that were performed by them. A supernatural agency was developed and a great power manifested. Would it be fair to say that Moses is engaging in a little bit of a, before Moses came on the scene, people are conflating correlation with causation, with the miracles, with the magic tricks. And in order to kind of tease that out, it actually required introducing a controlled variable or a new variable that is Moses, because he's going to kind of disprove that you aren't the causal link in your miracles, that what you're seeing here is correlated to something else, that there's something actual causal, and that is the power of God that I am representing. Would that be a fair assessment, Dallin?
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah. So let's think about that with ideologies, spirits that govern our life, things that feel good. We have a religious experience. What is the cause of someone's spiritual experience? And it's so hard because I can see, like, when you have something spiritual, something supernatural occurring to you that's beyond what you currently comprehend. I think often people will make the false inductive conclusion, or they'll draw false causal links between their experience and their preceding behavior, and they'll say that's where God is. It's God, when it really could be correlative. Hence, and that's why I like the word intelligence. It says you need intelligence. It says right here, false spirits existed in our days and have gone forth into the world, and that is needed intelligence, which God alone can impart from false spirits to prove whether the spirits were of God. I like the word intelligence because intelligence means light and truth, and light and truth forsake the evil one. When you are approaching a bunch of data, right, in science, it's just data, and you don't really see it clearly. You kind of only see the results of, in an observational study, you see the results of how these people have been living their life. If you're studying nutrition, and you can see that they've been eating this way because they're vegetarians and they're vegans, they live longer. And then you might be a nutritionist and you say, oh, because they're vegetarians, they have longer living life. They live longer. Therefore, vegetarian equals longevity. And you're looking at that from a low resolution. The light you're bringing onto that situation isn't clear because you're not keeping into account the healthy user bias. Maybe people that are vegetarians are more likely to engage in other confounding variables that make them more healthy. They're just more conscious. They sleep more, as opposed to meat eaters who eat a lot of McDonald's, and you're not making the proper comparison. But if you are a sophisticated thinker, you look at vegetarians and you realize maybe there's a bias here. It's the healthy, like I just said, the healthy user bias. So you're able to bring intelligence to, and intelligence is light and truth, TNC 93. You're separating the variables, because when you shine light on, when you look at a given set of data, everything kind of blurbs together, right? Everything's kind of gray and vague. But when you shine a light on it, it makes things more clear. An example was I have a good example of this. When I was working as a CNA 10 years ago, I was working in this clinic and it had crappy, shoddy lights that weren't very bright. And so we couldn't really see how the floor looked. And then they started remodeling and they replaced all the lights with these nice, bright lights. And all of a sudden, when they shined the bright lights, we were able to see how filthy the floor was that had been neglected for years.
Mm-hmm.
No one vacuumed it because they couldn't see how dirty it was until a light shined forth on it. The same thing with any in science. When you're doing your observational studies, you don't have the clarity of perspective, the light. You're just confounding variables together, and you clump that all together. When you shine intelligibility on it, you're able to critically assess it. You're able to separate this variable from that variable, healthy user bias from environmental factors. You're able to separate that, isolate it, then conduct your experiment. And that is what will, then you're able to determine the actual cause.
Yeah. I would say,
So we're on agreement. Yeah.
in my view, if you look at like a data set, you have a big data set coming in. Like I have in my job, I deal a lot with taking in a lot of data from a building, but the data doesn't actually mean anything. It doesn't do much unless you trend the data. So you have to you can look at the whole data set, but really the important thing is putting a trend on it. So graphing it, following it over a long period of time, and being able to separate the noise from the actual important data points.
Mm-hmm.
So you have noise, you have to trend it, and that's when you trend, when you look at the trend of the data, that's when you get information, you get intelligence, you get, you have understanding of the behavior of whatever you're testing.
Good point. I like how you bring up the trending, the trends. You're going to take a kind of a holistic approach. You're going to step out of, when you look at the trending of data, you step out of you kind of look at it collectively or in it holistically.
Yeah,
so what we're going to do here, yeah, go ahead.
You almost look at its behavior instead of just viewing it as like singular data points. It's the behavior of the data that kind of matters.
Yeah.
So.
Or to use Aristotelian language, you're looking for the causal, the one of the causes. What is causing this? You're not just accepting the conclusions of the data. You're accepting you're looking through the causes. And part of learning how to critically think is to not just accept a philosopher's conclusions or a prophet's conclusions, but is to analyze the premises of an argument.
Mm.
And so what we're doing here with the Try the Spirits is, and we're going to use intelligibility, we're going to look for the premises. What is the causal factors that's bringing about the miracles of Moses versus the miracles of the magicians in Pharaoh's court? And we're going to kind of bring under the light all of those different spirits that are infecting, at this time, the Kirkland Saints. And we're going to look at the trends. And I think what's really cool is as we go through this, we can actually, 200 years have passed, about 180 years or so have passed since Joseph Smith. We can actually kind of gauge the continuing trend of many of these philosophies, spirits, ideologies, and how they kind of manifested in the world. So this will be fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm stoked.
All right, thank you, Dallin,
Yeah.
for offering your scientific, your graduate perspective on science. That was helpful. All right, Parker, or no, Naomi, could you read verse 2?
Mm-hmm. Sorry,
Let's read 2 and 3.
Okay. The Witch of Endor is no less singular a personage. Clothed with a powerful agency, she raised the prophet Samuel from his grave. And he appeared before the astonished king and revealed unto him his future destiny. Who is to tell whether this woman is of God and a righteous woman, or whether the power she possessed was of the devil, and her a witch, as represented by the Bible? It is easy for us to say now, but if we had lived in her day, which of us could have unraveled the mystery? It would have been equally as difficult for us to tell by what spirit the prophets prophesied, or by what power the apostles spoke and worked miracles. Who could have told whether the powers of Simon the sorcerer was of God or of the devil? There always did, in every age, seem to be a lack of intelligence pertaining to this subject. Spirits of all kinds have been manifested in every age, and almost among all people. If we go among the pagans, they have their spirits. The Mohammedans, the Jews, the Christians, the Indians, all have their spirits, all have a supernatural agency, and all contend that their spirits are of God. Who shall solve the mystery? Try the spirits, says John, but who is to do it? The learned, the eloquent, the philosopher, the sage, the divine, all are ignorant. The heathens will boast of their gods and of the great things that have been unfolded by their oracles. The Mussulman will boast of his Koran and of the divine communications that his progenitors have received. The Jews have had numerous instances, both ancient and modern among them, of men who have professed to be inspired and sent to bring about great events. The Christian world has not been slow in making up the number.
Let's pause there. Questions. What do you guys think? Something stood out to me. Spirits of all kinds have manifested in every age among all people. If you go among the pagans, they have their spirits. The Jews, the Christians, all have their spirits. All have a supernatural agency, and all contend that their spirits are of God. You know, they have the correct spirit. What? Let's dive into this. What is a supernatural agency? So we're clear on our terms here.
What it can that I've got you can bring that up. What does Joseph mean by agency? He used it 3 times now. When he talked about supernatural agency was developed and a great power manifested, and when you talk about the witch of Endor, because that she was clothed with a supernatural agency. She raised up the prophet Samuel from the grave. The way we define agency now, and especially in our glossary term, is agency is equal to accountability. But I don't think that's the definition Joseph is using here.
What would you propose is the definition Joseph is using here?
Well, if they didn't use if the word powerful wasn't an adjective, I would suggest it means like a power or a force.
Okay. Well, okay, then let's what is okay, so what is force, Parker? And what is power? Let's define that. What constitutes something as having power or being power, and what constitutes something as having force and being force? And maybe that will lead us to an understanding of what agency is.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm still trying to work this out, but it seems to me that Joseph using agency to describe like a degree of control over supernatural element.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Supernatural agency was developed and very powerful. Agency. Well, what? Oh man, then. agency, all having power, all having supernatural agency. So it seems to me, that control would be a better word, or maybe
Control.
control or understanding of the
Could it be
supernatural.
could it be like a animating principle?
Yeah.
So here's my perspective on agency. So, from more of a cognitive science perspective.
Yeah.
Agency is this in psychology. Um, Agency is to act and not be acted upon. So it actually it has desires, it has goals, and it manifests them. It's like a spirit. So what is a spirit? And you can think about this with cognitive schemas. When you are governed by a spirit, okay, let's get this real practical. If you are one single house can look different from many different perspectives. If you look at the house and you're a home buyer, what looks salient? What shines from that house? What catches your attention? It's the appliances typically. Maybe the colors of the walls. It's the countertops. Are they marble? Are they wood? And you're going to look at that house completely different. So you're governed by a cognitive schema. That's what it's called in psychology. The cognitive schema is like a spirit, and it dictates perception. Now, if you are looking at that house as a tax collector, you're going to be looking at the square footage of roof lines. That's how they collect taxes these days, is they throw a drone over and they count the square footage of roof line. And so that's what's going to be salient. That's what's going to stand out when you look at this same house. If you are a thief and you want to rob that house, what you're going to be looking for, you don't care about the countertops. You don't care about the color of the walls. You are concerned with whether there's a security system and if the windows are easy to break into and if they have a guard dog. So you look at that house from a completely different cognitive schema. And if you are a home inspector, you're going to be looking at the foundations to make sure it's stable. And so all these different people overlay a cognitive schema, a spirit. They view the house through a different spirit. And based on that spirit that they are possessed by, or the hat that they're wearing for their certain occupation, will govern how they act in respects to the house and what they do with that house. Likewise with agency, you can, and I view agency as a spirit, because Joseph Smith is using those words like in conjunction with a lot with each other. When you are possessed by the Spirit of Christ, which we do when we just had the sacrament, that's what we do. We remember him so we can have the Spirit of Christ. It causes us to see the world as if we're Christ, and we're governed by that ordering principle. You can think about Elijah. Elijah comes in this, no, John the Baptist, sorry. John the Baptist comes in the spirit of Elijah. Is John the Baptist literally Elijah? And Elijah's spirit hops into John the Baptist and woo, he's John the Baptist reincarnated? Or is John the Baptist coming in the same ordering principle, the same cognitive schema? And he's acting in respects to that governing agency, the agency of Elijah. Therefore, it is tied to accountability, because if you're going to fulfill the role of Elijah, you're going to be accountable to the spirit of Elijah. If you fulfill the role of Adam, you're accountable to that role. And so this is what agency is. That's how I see agency as it's this governing, animating thing. Now, the thing about mankind is we have the ability to choose which spirit we're going to be governed by, if we so engage in that effort. That we can change the cognitive schema. We can change the spirit that possesses us. What do you think of that? What do you make of that to your proposal, Parker, on agency and spirit?
I like that quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a different view of spirit. It's not like this
Yeah.
material substrate that hops into your body, but it's more like an ordering principle.
Yeah. So with accountability. So when like the weight of Endor clothed with a powerful agency, meaning he had tying to agency and the idea of agency meaning accountability, what I propose, like having a control, because she was accountable to the devil, or
That governing principle.
that governing principle. She had a powerful control over over the supernatural to the extent that she was able to bring Samuel out of Sheol to talk to Saul.
Okay, so yeah, when you tap into, so that brings us, that means not all governing principles can be either good or evil, like Cain was possessed by the spirit of Satan when he brooded upon killing his brother. They are neither good nor bad. They are just mere powers that you can tap into, right? Parker disappeared.
Yeah, right. Yeah, all right.
Okay.
I'm going to the bathroom, but I want to.
No problem. Okay, so the role of philosophy then is to kind of, as I'm defining philosophy as in a sort of try to spirits, we're gonna try and cut through those governing principles so that we're animated by the correct one. Just because something produces results in the world, produces a given type of fruit or a given type of effect, doesn't mean that its cause is in line with the highest good. Does that sound like, am I being heretical, or that's a correct statement, Naomi and Dallin? Okay.
Yeah, really.
All right, Dallin, why don't you read the, let's move on. So that's what we're doing here. Let's go to verse 4. Verse 4 is loaded.
Okay.
Dallin, would you read that?
Yeah, there's one thing I was wanting to make, something you said about, so I'm trying to look at this now through the cause and effect, correlation, kind of, it's like an experiment. We're conducting an experiment here.
Yeah.
Identify the constants, the controls, and the variables, right?
Yes, that's what I see Joseph doing here.
Right. And so I think that one of the constants was identified in the previous, we're on 4, so the previous 3, talking about how, it's something about how all the Christian churches and the Jews and everything, they're all animated by spirits. Oh yeah, all have spirits. Yeah, all have their spirits, all have a supernatural agency, and all contend that their spirits are of God. So that to me is the control. That's the thing that remains constant throughout the whole thing, is that everybody has spirits. They've all got these supernatural agencies, and yeah, they all have their spirits. So that's the constant, or the control.
So
Right?
they have spirits, but where they're confounding their conclusions is they're equating their spirit to the Most High God.
Right. And so then you get into the variability.
Okay, the variability. And that's what we need to tease out here, because we want to make sure we're not, if we're going to make a claim that the spirit of covenant Christianity is the Most High God, we have to make, and we're going to believe that, we have to make sure that is on an authentic claim, and we're not actually being possessed by one of these lower order false spirits, these variable spirits.
Right.
All right, because your claim needs proof.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the verse 4, Dallin.
Okay, am I reading the whole thing?
So, yeah, let's read that whole thing so we kind of get the whole picture, and then we'll go back and dive into it. Okay.
Try the spirits, but what by? Are we to try them by the creeds of men? What preposterous folly! What sheer ignorance! What madness! Try the motions and actions of an eternal being, for I contend that all spirits are such. By a thing that was conceived in ignorance and brought forth in folly, a cobweb of yesterday. Angels would hide their faces, and devils would be ashamed and insulted, and would say, Paul we know, and Jesus we know, but who are you? Let each man of society make a creed and try evil spirits by it, and the devil will shake his sides, or would shake his sides. It is all that he would ask, all that he would desire, yet many of them do this, and hence many spirits are abroad in the world. One great evil is that men are ignorant of the nature of spirits. their power, laws, government, intelligence, etc. And imagine that when there is anything like power, revelation, or vision manifested, that it must be from God. Hence, the Methodists, Presbyterians, and other frequently possess a spirit that will cause them to lie down, and during its operation, animation is frequently entirely suspended. They consider it to be the power of God and a glorious manifestation from God. A manifestation of what? Is there any intelligence communicated? Are the curtains of heaven withdrawn, or the purpose of God developed? Have they seen and conversed with an angel? Or have the glories of futurity burst upon their view? No, but their body has been inanimate, the operation of their spirit suspended, and all the intelligence that can be obtained from when they arise, out of glory or hallelujah or some incoherent expression, but they have had the power.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
I have the power.
So I want to kind of draw our attention here. We'll take apart the first half of let each man in society make a creed and try the evil spirits, and the devil would shake his sides. It is all that he would ask, all that he would desire. Hold on, I'm gonna hand off my baby. She's getting a little frustrated here to my wife, and then we'll continue.
No worries.
So, Dallin, what I'm seeing here, when I see the devil shaking by his sides, I don't think that's a negative effect on the devil. I see he's shaking because he's happy. Am I reading that correctly?
He's laughing.
He's laughing. Yeah, okay. He's shaking. He's laughing. So they're making a creed. Okay, so now we're going to get into epistemology. Epistemology is the philosophy of how you come to know something. And it looks like here, from the test that they're giving, it's circular. Do you know what circular reasoning is, Dallin? And
Yeah, kind of. I don't know if I'd be able to fully explain it, but conceptually,
conceptual. So try and articulate it.
uh,
Best understanding what circular reasoning is.
isn't it something like your premise is essentially your conclusion?
Yes, it's begging the question, pretty much.
Right.
So a circular reasoning would be the LDS Church is true because we have a prophet. And because we have a prophet, the LDS Church is true. That would be circular.
Right. Yes, that makes sense.
So when they talk about here, let each man in society make a creed and to try the evil spirits by it, and the devil would laugh, shake at his sides. It is all that he would ask, all that he would desire. Yet many of them do this, hence many spirits are abroad in the world. So the epistemological standards that various Christian denominations kind of and pretty much everyone sets up to determine whether they are in truth, whether their spirit is the most high, their governing principle is the best governing principle, is a closed loop. It's circular. They set up a standard that is circular, it's faulty, that doesn't actually disclose, that's not actually correcting you. It's a closed loop standard, and then they just kind of dovetail to that. So an example I had, and I was pushed against this. This was very, very apparent when I left the LDS Church. The claim was, like I said, the LDS Church is true because they have a prophet, and because they have a prophet, and they have their authority, and their authority is derived because they have the most correct scripture on earth, the Book of Mormon. And as a Mormon, I would tell people to pray about this book. And if this book is true, it follows that the current LDS Church is true. But where I came into a moral contradiction was the LDS Church was enacting policies that were contrary to the Book of Mormon. And the Book of Mormon is the source in which they supposedly derive their authority, their claim to truth, their moral monopoly. And so when I saw that, what I saw looking at it was there is circular reasoning, begging the question here. The premises are the conclusions. And I saw that, and that's ultimately why I left the LDS Church. I couldn't live with that contradiction. But what many people do is that they do just that in their day-to-day lives. You know, they don't actually test the spirits to a standard that is outside of their scope.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So how do we, and do you think we do that to ourselves as covenant Christians? Do we fall into that folly?
Yeah.
Something is true. How do we do that? Let's do a little self-reflection. How we beg the question as covenant Christians.
Well, I think that mentality, since the covenant Christian community is vast majority ex-LDS, there's still that framework the cognitive schema you're talking about.
Yeah.
In my mind, that has translated over. And so my first thing is, well, you know, we've got Denver, we've got a prophet, and therefore, you know, all the work that's going on is true, which I believe, but I feel like it's easy to just translate that framework from the LDS Church into covenant Christianity.
So we've adopted that same we may have left the LDS Church, but we've maintained the same epistemological standard.
Right. That
in a closed loop. We swapped out Thomas S. Monson for Denver Snuffer.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, the prophet.
Yeah, prophet worship.
Not any fault on Denver Snuffer, by the way. I don't think I've studied cult dynamics. I've always been concerned. Am I in a cult by associated with covenant Christianity?
Yeah.
Thought about that. Because anyone who's in a cult will not say they're in a cult. That's just the thing.
Yeah.
Denver does everything opposite of what a cult leader would do, despite people in covenant Christianity being cultish.
Right.
So part of this
that's one of the variables. So can we root out that variable? Can we disregard that way of that cognitive schema, that spirit that keeps us trapped into this man worship? And I think Joseph Smith gives the remedy here in the next part when he talks about the Methodists and Presbyterians. They talk about this lying down and going woo, and then having an ecstatic, charismatic experience. But he does give a remedy. What's the antidote or the remedy he does that he gives? Is there any intelligence communicated? Right.
Okay. So I'm in school right now, and I'm taking a psychology course and social psych, and they talk about this. They've done many studies that people will self-report that they learned more when they attach their learning to an emotionally positive experience. So you can do this if you're a professor and you want to get good ratings on Rate My Professor. You don't necessarily have to teach a good course that has good information. You just got to make the people feel good. And they actually did this by having actors teach a course that didn't actually know anything about the course, but they bullshitted their way. And I'm using bullshit very particularly. That's a technical term. But they bullshitted their way through the course, and they got high ratings from students. Students loved it, as opposed to the professors actually knowledgeable, giving good information wasn't rated as high. And they did this with reading too. Like they did controlled studies where they had people read a book, and then they would follow up with like positive experiences after they just read that book or read that article, and people would rate learning more. But when they actually had the controlled standard of testing to see if they actually glean information from the text, no difference. Or they didn't learn more. They perceived. So when you have an emotional, when someone is teaching you and someone is presenting something, or a charismatic preacher, if they can push those emotional buttons in your psyche, it neurologically this activates the insula, this activates the whole neural mechanisms, and it creates the salience network. And when the salience network is online, everything seems like it glimmers and it's light. And so you think you are being edified and you're learning something. But if you were to ask that person, are you actually learning something, and quiz them, they can't actually articulate. So there's no intelligence communicated. What was communicated, what was transferred, was just good feelings. So I used the word bullshit earlier to describe this phenomenon. This is known as bullshitting in psychology, where when you want, you can teach truth or you can bullshit your way. So this was what the sophists did in ancient Athens, is they would learn how to bullshit other people. And the way you bullshit someone is you use buzzwords. You use a bunch of catchphrases to kind of get people's emotions up and riled up. And there's a good example of this, the Homer Simpsons. The Simpsons has this skit where two aliens are running for president, and one of the aliens says this in a speech: "When I was a boy, I loved baseball, and now I'm twirling towards freedom." And the whole crowd goes, "Yay!" And they all feel edified. What was actually communicated? Nothing. It was just a bunch of catchy American phrases.
Family Guy did
Nothing was communicated. No intelligence.
Family Guy did a similar bit where Lois was running for mayor, and she was trying to be actually lay out what she wanted to do, and they were responding, and so she just started saying 9/11 over and over, and that got the crowd riled up.
Yeah. Oh no, yeah. Hitler did this like crazy. Doesn't actually, you can read his speeches, didn't actually communicate anything substantial in his speeches, just push the mob's trigger buttons, and then they get riled up. So I think that's an epistemological point here. Maybe angels appear as light because they seem light because they're all happy and blissful, but you need to ask, what is actually being communicated? What are the facts? What's the intelligence? What are the premise, and conclusions? I think you see that all through Scripture. Especially in the Covenant of Christ, like when Nephi is communicating with an angel, he's actually communicating knowledge. This means that. Look here. Same with Mother Mary when she was approached by the angel about the conception. The angel distilled knowledge. You will do this and this. This will occur to you, and it follows this will happen. So they actually communicated a way, a path, a logical argument, you could say, as opposed to a lot of these self-help gurus that will just spout out conclusions. Like when I say conclusions, they just spout out manifestations. Think happy, do this, do that, but they don't actually give you intelligence of like the how-to, the why. Yeah. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on that? About kind of, is that a fair way to kind of gauge the truth of something?
Yeah, I would say.
So can you think of any examples in your life when this happens, and how would you kind of use this standard of, is there any intelligence communicated? Are the curtains of heaven withdrawn, or the purposes of God developed? Have they seen or conversed with angels? Have the glories of the fruit of futurity burst upon their views? So I think if you're going to have a spiritual experience, you need to ask. This is another so baked in there, baked, because so people have a good experience and they think they learn something, but it doesn't lead them anywhere. When he talks about the futurity, the glories of the futurity, yeah, burst upon their views, there is something there communicated about what is to come. So it's prophecy. So prophecy is you have an expectation. You can expect something to occur in the future. This is known in Aristotelian philosophy as teleology. Telos, that there is an expectation and you're moving towards that end. I think a lot of people who have spiritual experiences that's not communicated to them in their spiritual encounter. They don't have a clarity of direction to take towards a given end. Instead, what they are given is a charismatic experience of shaking on the floor, and it's completely unintelligible. Or if they're speaking in tongues, you see a lot of evangelical sects do this. They aren't actually giving insight into how someone else should live their life better in respects to the highest spirit. They are just given gibberish, and then they feel good about it, and then they go on their merry way.
Can I say,
Yeah.
can I say something about you can come about the future the what intelligent the future the
Futuridity.
the great futurity for a component view. Denver talked about prophecy and about how prophecy is not communicating in a way where you show specific future events so that people will know and might be able to stop them. I've seen a lot of false prophets, both in Mormon breakoff and Christianity and charismatic Christianity, where their prophecy is really hyper specific, and it's really easy to be like, yeah, this is false, because why would God tell you that? Like the prophecy I see in scripture and in from actual prophets are more patterns. They're more connected to the narrative of the world rather than like for example, most of the stuff I've seen have to deal with, oh yeah, this will happen to Trump, this will happen to Trump, China will come in, Russia will come in, and then a few years later I can look back and be like, yeah, that didn't happen. What you talking
So you're a
about?
false prophet.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to tie that into this principle of falsifiability. To falsify something in science, this is something. If you're going to present a experiment or a hypothesis, it has to be falsifiable. And many experiments get presented that, yeah, you can't falsify that. So how can we know that it's a? How do we gauge? How do we measure that to a standard? This is why Einstein's a genius, because he predicted an eclipse based on his theory, and that could have been proven false. He had to put something on. He had to put his career on the line here, but then it was proven correct. So there's falsifiability. A lot of New Age mystics, self-help gurus, they'll spout out a bunch of self-help catchphrases, but they're not falsifiable. They're not falsifiable. And if you're not falsifiable in your claims, you can't be held account to it. And so I believe here, with the epistemology of God, how he works with mankind is he gives a prophecy. There's intelligence communicated, so there's the how to know how. You're able to differentiate the variables, and they give an expectation of the future that can be false. So there is a measuring stick. You will know that this spirit is false or true. I think a false spirit will give you vague, mystical slogans that can't be proven, that they aren't held to an account. Am I correct? Am I saying that? I didn't plan this part of this discussion. I'm thinking this through in real time.
Yeah.
Like I have to believe that it makes sense to me that God would present things that are falsifiable to us, so that we can know whether it's God or not.
I think with false spirits, they're either not falsifiable or they're super hyper specific in a way that tends to make you over reliant on that false spirit for information about the future. I would see this with like in cultish. We see this with doomsday cult. Like, oh yeah, on this day the world will end, so we need to prepare. That day comes and goes, and then the false prophet goes, oh, actually I misread the sign. It's actually going to be on this day, and they keep and put it back, as opposed to true prophecy, which like I said, I think connect to the pattern or the narrative of the world. For example, in 2017, right after the covenant, Denver issued a prophecy where he said you are going to notice something like the spirit, and he tied it to the eclipse, like the spirits of men are going to be darkened, and there will be increased resentment of Gentiles, or in political language will be a rejection of white privilege. And
That
men will
happened.
be increasingly angry with each other. And at the time, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's super vague, that's super whatever. But looking back, I'm like, yeah, that's been more prophetic, like by the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because now you have a trend log.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dallin. Yeah.
yeah.
So what I've been thinking about with this, with what you're talking about, the idea of having futurity burst upon your mind. Where does it say that?
Bottom of the page if you're
Manifest
Right here.
Yeah, so yeah, having the glories of futurity burst upon their views. I'm thinking about, okay, we have this big data set, we have these constants, and we have these variables. When you have the data set, the first thing you want to do is trend it so you can understand how it behaves, how the data is behaving, and you want to identify the variables. When you know the variables and the constants, you have that trend log, you can then predict what will happen in the future based on a manipulation of the variables, right? So I'm trying, maybe I'm equating it here, but like I'm seeing this as like kind of a step thing. You gather the data, you trend the data, you understand the variables and the constants, and then you get that burst of futurity because you understand the correct trend that's happening. Does that make sense?
Yes, that is actually a lot of the current cognitive sciences converging on that. That to be intelligence is to do just that: take data, be able to analyze it, and then predict. It's predictive processing. An intelligent creature can make predictions. That's what makes them intelligent. They're able to use philosophical terms now. They're able to engage in conceptualization, try the spirits in the conceptual realm, because they've gathered all the patterns here on Earth, and use their intellect to foresight into the future and make a prediction, and then they're able to move their actions in accordance with that best line of best fit data, you could say. They're able to observe the trends and then follow through with that. That's why also philosophy is wisdom, philosophia. You're able to, Margaret Barker talks about this idea of wisdom is obtaining a heavenly perspective, where you're able to see things and then make the correct, you're able to apply from that perspective the correct action in a given moment, because you know how that correct action leads to the prophesied event that's also falsifiable, but still prophesied future.
So this is probably why we are encouraged to search out the scripture, especially Isaiah, and liken them to ourselves, because we can, in the scripture, it's the pattern, it's the trend, the pattern, the narrative of the way that the world is going. And when we become familiar with it, we are able to see the pattern, see the trend, and are able to know what questions we need to ask to what answer we should be looking for.
So
Yeah.
in science, I talked about observational studies. That's when you have a cohort and you just watch what they do over time. It's called epidemiological studies. You're not changing the variables because there's ethical reasons. You can't make people go on this diet that could kill them, but you just watch people who smoke, and you're able to observe that trend. And they say observational studies are really good not for making conclusions, but for generating hypothesis. That's would be asking the correct questions. You have to observe the data then you can generate a hypothesis. Now you can actually test it if you're going into science. But that requires that observation hypothesis, which would be our questioning. So to go back to the scriptures, Nephi, Abraham, brother of Jared, they were observing their life. They were taking full account of their situation. Really observing it. They weren't just lost in some esoteric contemplation of the good, but they were actually observing the situation of their life, seeing a trend, and then they were offering a prayer to God based on the trend. So they were asking a question to God, making hypothesis towards God, a concern based on that trend, and that's what actually beckoned the answer, because that's how God works. That's how God works. He works on those epistemological standards.
Yeah.
What do you make of that, Parker?
Yeah, I
Does that
agree.
sound correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have enough gas in the tank for one more verse, and then we'll call it quits for the day?
Yeah, I want to make one more observation about that. So would repentance be understanding the pattern, and you are understanding the trend, realizing that the course of your life is deviating from what you should be doing, and correcting it, and aligning yourself back with the right trend? Does that make sense?
Yes. So repentance is metanoia, right? Not putanir as in the Latin, but metanoia, to expand your perspective. If you're not repentant, you will look at the trend of your life and you'll put it under the rigor of a closed loop circular reasoning, the same epistemological standards that are just closed loop, the creeds of men that are self-validating. But when you have metanoia, you're able to actually take on the perspective of a higher spirit, and you're able to judge it with rigor from a standard that is above your own little creed. And you're able to see how the trend of your life is in alignment with that, and so you're able to course correct. That would be repentance from this paradigm.
Nice.
So, and that requires humility to be able to see that. All right, let's read one more. Parker, will you read verse 5, and then we'll tie off the conversation with that and pick up next time.
Sure. I'll read from here, y'all can follow along. All right.
The shakers.
Yeah, the shaker will whirl around on heel, impelled by a supernatural agency or spirit, and think that he is governed by the Spirit of God. And the jumper will jump and enter into all kinds of extravagant things. A primitive mystic will shout under the influence of that spirit until he will rend the heavens with his cries. While the Quakers, or friends, moved as they think by the Spirit of God, will sit still and say nothing. Is God the author of all this? If not all of it, which should he recognize? Surely such a heterogeneous mass of confusion can never enter into the kingdom of heaven. Every one of these profess to be competent to try his neighbor's spirit, but no one can try his own. And what is the reason? Because they have not a key to unlock, no rule wherewith to measure, and no criterion whereby they can test it. Can anyone tell the length, breadth, or height of a building without a rule? Test the quality of metals without a criterion, or point out the movements of the planetary system without a knowledge of astronomy? Certainly not. And if such ignorance as this is manifested about a spirit of this kind, who can describe an angel of light? If Satan should appear as one in glory, who can tell his color, his sign, his appearance, his glory, or what is the manner of his manifestation? Who can detect the spirit of the French prophets with their revelation, conviction, and power, and manifestation? Or who can point out the spirit of the Irvingites with their apostles and prophets, convictions, and tongues and interpretation, etc., etc.? Or who can drag into daylight and develop the hidden mysteries of the false spirits that so frequently are made manifest among the Latter-day Saints? We answer that no man can do this without the priesthood and having a knowledge of the laws by which these spirits are governed. For as no man knows the things of God but by the Spirit of God, so no man knows the spirit of the devil and his power and influence but by possessing intelligence, which is more than human, and having unfolded through the medium of the priesthood the mysterious operations of his devices. Without knowing the angelic form, the sanctified look and gesture, and the zeal that is frequently manifested by him for the glory of God, together with the prophetic spirit, the gracious influence, the godly appearance, and the holy garb, which is so characteristic of his proceedings and his mysterious windings. A man must have the discerning spirit before he can drag into daylight the callous influence and unfold it onto all the world with its soul-destroying, diabolic, and horrid colors. For nothing is a greater injury to the children of men than to be under the influence of the false spirit when they think they have the Spirit of God. Thousands have felt the influence of the terrible power and baneful effect. Thousands have felt long pilgrimages have been undertaken, penances endured, and the pain, misery, and ruin have fallen in their train. Nations have been convulsed, kingdoms overthrown, provinces laid waste, and blood, carnage, and desolation are garments in which it has been clothed. The Turks, the Hindus, the Jews, the Christians, the Indians. In fact, all nations have been deceived, imposed upon, and injured through the mischievous effects of false spirit. There's a lot here. Holy cow.
Let's talk about it for a little bit, and then I'll pick up this section again next time we meet.
Okay.
To kind of revisit it. What stood out to you, Parker? I mean, there's a lot of things that stood out to me, but you said, "Holy crap!" There's a lot. So what really was poignant to you?
All right. We talked about Quaker, for Charlie Mackey, the Quaker. All that stuff. It's interesting. He talked about like, hey, like you gotta have a key to unlock the rule where it was to measure and the criterion where I can test it. Talk about something you need to test it by control.
Yeah, test. There's a standard.
Yeah, and then he can something really weird, like if Jason should appear as one category, you can tell his color, his signs, his appearance, category, or what manner of his manifestation. And then you gotta have the priesthood without knowing the angelic form, the sanctified look and gesture, and the zeal that frequently manifests by him from the glory of God. And gathering with the prophetic spirit, the gracious influence, the godly appearance, and the holy garb, which is so characteristic of his proceeding to make serious winding. What stood out to me is I think that what I really believe this is what ritual is for. We got this is something. Okay. Literal kind of
So it's a ritual.
all right, there you go. I actively trained him to want a tree every time we go outside. Anyway, I think ritual is what provides the standard, the control, the measure that we can use.
So the ordinance of the power of godliness is manifested in the ordinances thereof. That will be the epistemological standard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Within the Sermon on the Mount, it talks about the frequent the frequent mention of the different spirit, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one can prove two masters for either hate the one, love the other, or equal follow the one, nor the other. You can't prove God and covet. You wear a false prophet who comes to you in sheep clothing, but kind of rather than wolves, can identify them by their cloak. Can you gather grape from thorn or fig from sickle? The wise man, the foolish man. Dave Butler theorized, in fact, during the temple ceremony, you would be tempted by actors playing the role of the devil or false spirit. I believe that during the ritual, during the true temple ordinance, you will be taught how to judge between a true spirit and a false spirit.
So a ritual, one of the functions of a ritual is to communicate knowledge of discernment. So you know the bad actors and the good actors in the narrative of creation. You know who is Satan, who is a false spirit, and who is a true spirit. And because there is no ritual or ordinance to ground one's epistemology in, they are going afray.
Yeah.
Which should kind of go back. Then that would also bring up the question then, Nauvoo, they were all acting spunky after their experience in Nauvoo. So they had an epistemological frame. Kirkland. Yeah. So that would not be either the ordinance was false in Kirkland because it didn't actually ground them into a correct ritual, and it wasn't the correct ritual that properly informed them, or their minds were not ready for such knowledge.
Yeah, then I don't believe in my word. I think that's what Nauvoo was going to prepare them for.
Yeah, because rituals aren't magic formulas that correct your action. I don't think they are. They're not magic pixie dust. You don't get a ritual and all of a sudden you can see the world clearly. It does require work on the initiate's end, which is what I think Joseph Smith wrote this so that next time they have a temple ceremony, a ritual, they actually have the fortified sound mind, a firm mind in every form of godliness, as Moroni says.
Yeah. Well, the ritual that we do have, the ordinance that we do have, what do we ask? We ask what we promise. So that we can even remember because your son's body. It shows you that we are willing to take upon themselves the name of your son. Always remember him and keep the commandments he give them. Because they can always have his spirit to be with them. It's not the fact that, like, oh yeah, we eat bread, we drink wine, and all of a sudden we're holy. But we have to do the thing accompanying the ritual. We have to always remember him. We have to keep his commandments. We have to take his spirit. We have to have his invite his spirit to be with us. By the answer to the prayer of recovery. You pray each time you partake of the sacrament that you can always have my spirit be with you. And what is my spirit? It's to love one another as I love you. Do my will and you'll know my doctrine. For you. I'm gonna pull it up.
Yeah.
It's important.
Let's visit that next week, Parker. We are running out of time. We'll go back to the scripture next time we meet. Those are good points. I want to contemplate more on this ritual aspect because this whole entire narrative or this whole entire sermon is bound up with respects to a ritual going haywire, you might say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you contemplate that next time we'll start with this verse again next time we come back, and we'll kind of pick up from there.
Okay. Cool. Naomi, do you have any other thoughts?
You're on to something though, and I want to explore it more fully. So think about this next 2 weeks, and then gather your thoughts together, and we'll hit it from there next week.
Yeah, cool.
We don't really have any.
I have one thing to kind of give credence to this whole scientific approach we've been taking. You and I down have been kind of vibing on the same empirical standards here with epistemology. It was this criterion that Joseph Smith brought up and dragging it out to be able to observe it, to understand it, because there is this underlying premises that knowledge is power, which Joseph Smith quotes often throughout his sermons, and also Francis Bacon, the founder of modern science, also quotes, knowledge is power. But I want to talk about this notion of the French prophets, and I don't know what he's talking about here, but I am familiar with French philosophers from just preceding Joseph Smith's time, and that would be Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau's Metaphysics and Epistemology, he views that reason is evil. To be able, the reason why mankind is so fallen and evil is because they developed this capacity to reason, which then caused people to judge one another and then to separate, and then we lost our way from Eden because we can have this ability to rationalize, to make things intelligible, to give an account. And so Rousseau's whole philosophy is this return to this Edenic hippie bliss, and that is what we need to do as society. That philosophy was the foundation of the French Revolution, which Joseph Smith would be familiar with because the French Revolution happened in 1792. So you got French prophets, French philosophers bringing about the French Revolution. And so that is what Joseph Smith is gathering information on, well, I believe, when we talk about the French philosophers and their entire philosophy, and I would assume their prophetic tradition, is one of anti-reason, anti-standards, because with any standard comes a judgment. People don't want to have judge standards because when you impose a standard on yourself, you also subject yourself to judgment in respect to that standard. And so the Rousseauian school of philosophy, which the unschooling in education comes from, and a lot of modern tentacles into no judgment, hippie-free love movements come from that Rousseauian line of thought. I want to put that out there, which is very, very anti-reason, and that does make its way into. I'm getting a little crazy. That does make its way into New England. When I talked about before we started recording about the communist, socialistic utopias that were popping up in New England, because people want to live in communes, that is directly Rousseauian philosophy dictating that, which at its core has no judgment. And so what Joseph Smith is bringing here is a very Lockean, empirical analysis. You need to be able to actually judge. There's a standard which you judge these philosophies, these spirits that govern your behavior. We're going to drag that into the light. The way of knowledge is not like a Rousseauian, I feel good about it and it's my impulse, and that's not the standard that Joseph Smith is putting forth. It's not about your feelings. It's about intelligibility, rationality, understanding what's governing, and having that coupled with God. Let's pick this up next time. I'm gonna lay that out there. We'll read verse 5 again, and then we'll pick up next time, and we'll maybe make it 2/3 of the way, and then we'll do a third time and finish it. But I think did this give you a lot to think about, Dallin, Naomi, Parker?
Yeah.
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 It's pretty cool. Are we planning to do this bi-weekly?
Let's do it bi-weekly so I can we can fill our tanks.
Okay. Cool.
We're busy people, so
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, bi-weekly would be cool.
Yeah.
I'm down.
Awesome. Good. Well,
Alan, it's so good to see you. I haven't seen your faces. Well, I haven't seen any of your faces in so long.
it's good
know.
to be back doing this after being separated for so long.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been super busy, but I got a big promotion and a big raise.
Oh,
Congratulations.
dude,
Here, let me
great.
pause this. Let me stop the recording.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for listening.